Set out by Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, companies in retail, hospitality and leisure can claim a once-off grant.
For businesses in the most affected sectors who are asked to close, they will receive up to £9,000 in a one-off cash grant. It's important to remember that comes on top of the existing monthly grant of £3,000 that those businesses receive and the extension of furlough all the way through to April. We remain committed to protecting jobs and supporting businesses.
Last year, Sunak announced emergency help for the UK economy worth $380 billion. It included a mass job protection scheme due to run to the end of April. The country will likely need it, with JMP Morgan analysts predicting a hefty 2.5% fall in output for the first 3 months of the year. Yesterday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced new stringent lockdown measures to curb the new COVID-19 variant, which requires people to work from home and sees the closure of schools, while hospitality venues and non-essential shops must remain closed. Meanwhile, the UK-based airline British Airways is currently reviewing their plans in response to the lockdown. The lockdown is expected to remain in place at least through the middle of February.
Right, for a little bit more on that, we're now joined by economist, journalist Guy Shone, who's the Chief Executive Officer of market research firm Explain the Market. He joins us now from London. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the programme. Always good to talk to you, but this time lockdown for the third time.
That's right, Peter. Lockdowns had many different names. We're now talking about level 5. And of course, it's really, really tough for all of those businesses that just now simply can't trade. I mean, the high street in the UK was under challenge anyway, even before COVID. It suffered greatly throughout the COVID crisis. And now, just when retailers, cafes, restaurants, hotels were just getting back to something like the ability to trade again, we've been hit with an extremely tough lockdown situation. So very, very tough for business owners. And we've seen all sorts of impossible conundrums throughout this crisis. We're seeing awful scenes in hospitals where, as the piece there demonstrated, doctors are being forced to choose between cancer operations and COVID patients. And then in other ways, we're seeing these impossible conundrums too, where parents are thinking, well, how do I work online but also look after my kids? So all the way through society now, we're seeing people put in very difficult situations.
I mean, this is the third time around now. Is there a better level of preparedness about what to do because this is the third time around?
Yeah, I think we're certainly seeing that in the sort of provision of support services that people have got. Ultimately, there are only really the same messages which people need to abide by. And we've seen that with the government. We saw that from the doctor there in the report, that it's those simple things repeated again and again that people need to do. There isn't really any other way out of this crisis other than ramping up the distribution of the vaccine and making sure that whilst that's going on, all citizens do whatever they can to avoid and reduce social contact. Unfortunately, there is no magic solution to this. It is just another few months of a tough time after a whole year of uncertainty.
I see that the markets are losing steam as businesses are calling for larger lockdown support packages. Take us through how the packages in the past have worked and what kind of help? Is it just to keep staff employed, or what was the support for?
Well, look, there has been a big package of support for businesses. But all of this sounds tremendously huge when you just look at the figures involved. Another 4.5 billion announced this week for those businesses who have been hardest hit. We've had billions and billions and billions more. We've had, millions of workers across the UK who are being furloughed, so their wages are being paid effectively by the government. And smaller businesses have had the ability to take government-backed loans. All sorts of help has been available. The fundamental problem, though, is that it's always remained unclear what the route out of this crisis actually looks like. There has been a reaction from the market to the positive success of the vaccines. That did have a big effect. The markets were very pleased about that because for the first time, we actually got some certainty about how and when we might come out of this crisis. And it has to be said, for all of the negative statistics that we've seen, hitting 60,000 positive COVID tests per day for the first time today, tragically another 830 deaths. On the hopeful side of things, the UK has now given the vaccine to 1.3 million people, which is a lot higher than many other countries across Europe. So we're seeing the figures which are pointing out both the tragedy and the hope of this crisis.
All right. I mean, this vaccine story, very much a positive side, and I believe that the UK also the first to start using the Oxford University AstraZeneca vaccine on top of the Pfizer one. And also that Britain's on its own is vaccinated more than the whole of Europe. But much like, and I wonder if it's the same, here in South Africa, as much as there was support for business, there are a number of businesses that are gone and will never come back because of the COVID-19. Have you seen similar patterns in the UK, even in the face of these support packages?
Yeah, there've been many examples. In fact, when it comes to those hardest hit industries like retail and hospitality, frankly, there were many famous names on the high street that were struggling anyway, struggling because it's very expensive to have lots of physical shops at a time when the whole world can just click on Amazon or another example and have whatever it is they want arrive at their front door within 24 hours. And also struggling because people's geographic patterns were changing too. It's very hard to get huge numbers of people to high streets when there were so many options online and so many out-of-town shopping centres. So many of the hardest hit were struggling anyway. So what the support has done has sort of kept them going. But in a sense, really, it's just deferred those tough decisions. And the investors behind the scenes, well, they can see the long-term picture too. And what investors look for is growth, a plan for sustained growth over a period of time. Now, if they can't see that, then they're likely to withdraw their support. And we've seen that in many cases, unfortunately.
5 days into Brexit, the UK is free and on your own now. Has this COVID-19 pandemic affected things? Has Brexit affected things? We saw Dover, Calais literally come to a standstill at one point. And one needs desperately to make sure that those trucks keep on moving and that business continues to happen. Has it been affected by Brexit?
No question, but just like the COVID situation, it's a mixed picture, Peter. We saw a crisis just before the Brexit trade deal was announced, where there was all sorts of problems trying to get through the UK's busiest port over to France. That was extremely difficult, went on for a protracted period of time. The markets, though, did react positively to the Brexit trade deal, and it has been seen in some quarters as a success for Boris Johnson. There is, though, I think now the real challenge, the real task, almost the real hard work, which comes in figuring out the detail, because as we've said before on this programme, there are many things which weren't included in the deal, which the politicians and the markets haven't had really a chance to give their view on. One being, what do we do about financial services, this huge sector, which is tremendously important to the UK? Well, that hasn't been covered really at all in the trade deal. And, critics have said that banks, investment houses, even regulators have been forced to figure out and work out the detail with their business partners on the continent themselves. That is likely to provide lots more work, a bit more bureaucracy, and potentially some more disruption in the near future.
All right. Perhaps anecdotally, I mean, I know one person in the United Kingdom, not much of an entrepreneur, but was able to get £50,000 as a loan from the government. And my biggest fear is I don't know if this person will be able to pay this money back. Is this a concern for the British government? And it sounds as if there perhaps isn't too much criteria being applied in how this money is being handed out.
Yeah, I mean, that was the government-backed small business loan was incredibly popular. When it was announced, there were queues of people online, businesses who were desperately looking for it, all sorts of banks offering that service to lots and lots of people right across the country. And because it was backed by the government, in practice that was not as easy. It was perhaps slightly less of a pain to get through the vetting process in order to secure that loan. And I think part of that was driven by the fact that the speed with which the government was trying to act necessarily meant that things had to happen quickly, and perhaps they felt that getting the money out where it could be spent and used, and partly to keep people working, keep people employed, that was actually an expense that was preferable to having people go bust and end up having to claim welfare. So all of these calculations, like in a lot of other countries, have had to have been done very quickly. And no doubt there are going to be people who will, be sort of potentially in detrimental situations as a result of taking on debt that perhaps they can't afford.